Hello, and welcome to the Six Figure Developer Podcast, a podcast where we talk about new and exciting technologies, professional development, clean code, career advancement, and more. I'm John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I'm John Ash.
With us today is Oh, now we talked about it so much I messed myself up. Okay, with us today is Tanya Janca. Tanya is founder and CEO at We Hack Purple Academy, community and podcast. She's a best-selling author of Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so before we sort of jump into the meat of things, Tanya, would you give our listeners maybe a little introduction to yourself, like tell them how you got started in the industry?
So I have probably one of the more unusual career paths for a woman. So my aunt graduated computer science, and she was like the first woman in Ontario, where I'm from, to graduate. Then my other aunt did, then three of my uncles did, then my cousins did. And then I was like, oh, you know what I think I want to do? I think I want to take computer science. My parents were like, we know. But they let me come to it on my own. Yeah, and then I was a programmer for a really long time. And I'd met a bunch of security teams, but I wasn't super sold on security for a long time. I was the average dev who would go like this with the security team. Functionality versus security. Deadlines versus security. You're saying no and not explaining why. But then I met someone, and he was an ethical hacker, like penetration tester. And I still wasn't convinced. I still didn't want to join, but he was in a band. And I was in a band. So I play drums and guitar and sing. And I am the same name on Spotify. And like I have band albums and all of that. So I went up to him at work one day and I was like, hey. He's like, hey. I'm like, my band wrote this song called Mandatory Dance Party. And I want to make a mobile app that where if two people both have it installed and then they're close to each other, it does this crazy beep countdown. And then they have to have a dance party on the spot. And then I want to use that little like, I can't remember what it's called, inside your phone, to see who moves more, and then that person wins the dance battle. And then they just go about their day. And he's like, I'm in. So then we became friends. And then he spent a year and a half convincing me to join the security field. And then that's when I basically fell in love with the idea of being that person that helps all the devs make secure software. And I didn't know that was a job that a person could have, where you still get to hack on things, you still get to write some code, but you also, like, you just kind of run around and help everyone. And I was like, yeah, that's for me.
Yeah, so that's a good segue into what are you doing these days?
So for quite a while, I was doing application security full-time because I really like it. But then I worked for Microsoft as a developer advocate. So it's like fancy new age bottom up marketing. But basically I would just get to create super cool demos and like smash things on stage. And I got to have a license to everything that Microsoft makes. And that was so cool. I'm like, free everything. And imagine the stuff you can make when you have free everything, right? But yeah, then I wanted to move on, and I joined a startup that didn't work out. And so I was trying to decide what to do next. And all these people wrote me and said, hey, can I pay you to come teach our devs secure coding? And I was like, oh, I like money. Okay, yeah, I'll be there. And then someone else said, hey, could you come and train our AppSec team and like help us build our AppSec program? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So then I started making courses online, and then it got bigger than me, and now there's 6 of us, and we have an academy. And yeah, so I basically, like, we have a full program with a certification and a textbook. Oh, I didn't mean to drop, but yeah. And basically, like, now you can like graduate from like a multi-course program and like become an application security professional. And then this year is secure coding. So I want to have courses like for dev, because I've been teaching it for a while, but recording the videos and putting them into the thing and I'm kind of a perfectionist. So I'm like, oh no, it has to be perfect. And my team's like, calm down. I'm like, no. So it takes a while for me to make a course because I'm just like, I want it to be beautiful. But yeah, so Basically, I guess I make courses and then I do live training too, but it's more about like trying to teach as many people as possible. When I worked at Microsoft, they would always talk about scaling. And they're like, how can we scale you, Tanya? Because we can't fly you to every single place in the world, but gosh darn, they tried. Like I made it to super duper elite 100,000 mile status in April of 2019.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So they tried. But they're like, if you write more and you like record videos, then you can do a workshop once with 30 people, but then like hundreds of people can enjoy it afterwards, like especially if they're in a different time zone than you. And I'm like, oh, yes, yes. And then when I told them like I was starting my own company, they're like, that's not what we meant. They're very supportive though. My colleagues at Microsoft were very, very supportive and still are.
So let's talk about application security. What is that? Because we here are mostly application developers. I've been a line of business application developer for the last 20 years or so, and early in my career, security was ensuring that there was a login form and maybe a known password for accessing the application if we were lucky. It could have been just that it was accessible only on the intranet. So what are we talking about when we're talking about application security?
So my definition of application security is every and any activity that you do to ensure that your software is secure. And so this could be creating a formalized application security program where there's a different security activity during every phase of the system development lifecycle. But it could also be a dev listening to a podcast, and let's say at work they use Node.js. And then the podcast says, yeah, there's this version of Node.js and it has this vulnerability in it and it's really scary. And then the dev goes back to work and they look and they're like, oh, one of our apps has that exact version. Can we make a plan this week to upgrade it to a newer version because I'm worried? And then they do it. And then that is part of AppSec. So so devs do lots of different security things all the time and probably don't even realize or think about the fact that they're doing it, if that makes sense. But all of them is helping us fight the good fight as security folks. And basically like we can't do it without the devs. So yeah. So application security also is a thing that I think they should be teaching in universities and schools that they're not. I'm hoping that will change over the next couple of years. Mm-hmm.
So in my experience, security is kind of like, I don't know, JavaScript. You learn what you think that you need to learn, and then as soon as you've learned it, you're out of date. There's the thing that you learned doesn't work anymore. It's not the way that it's supposed to go. You're doing it all wrong. You need to change again. And so you get in that
last week. You suck. How did you not know?
Right? Oh, you didn't know about this new vulnerability? It's like that kind of thing. Is there a way that someone could stay relatively on top of the matter and not, invest like a month securing an application just to realize that, oh, well, we're not using JWTs anymore. We're using whatever's next.
Mm-hmm. Yes and no. So if you want to keep up on every single fancy vulnerability that exists, you're going to have to keep doing work all the time. However, what I usually prescribe is instead learning the basics to make sure that the code you're writing generally is pretty darn good, and then doing steps within your system development lifecycle to verify that you're doing well. So for instance, like a lot of the vulnerabilities that you would hear about on a podcast, most of them are in frameworks or third-party components. So like, I don't know if you heard a couple years ago, there was image magic and they named the vulnerability image tragic. And basically if you had the image magic, basically it, like you would upload an image and it would do like super fancy pants stuff to it and help you format it so it'd look really good. Right? And lots of devs put that in their app because it was really nice, but it had a huge, huge, awful vulnerability in it. But if you use a software composition analysis tool, which you can totally put in a pipeline, or you could have it scan your code every week as it's sitting in your repo, it'll tell you, oh, there's a known vulnerability in this. We're concerned because you have this version. Could you please either update it to this, or in some cases, if it's bad enough, they'll actually tell you how to go in and edit your code to make sure, like to actually edit part of the framework just to make sure you're safe until a real patch comes out. And so software composition analysis is a super fast check for a pipeline. It's not like some of the other security checks where it's like really hit and miss with the results you're going to get. It'll tell you this is known to be bad. It can't tell you, I know for sure it's secure, but it can tell you like no one's reported anything wrong with it. We took a look at it, does not look awful. Everything seems to be going okay. So you have our blessing. And that's a pretty good deal.
Okay, and these pipeline tools exist for most platforms, right? Like I know Node has one. When you use npm, it'll go, oh, this package has a security issue. You need to get that updated. But they exist for most platforms, right?
Yes and no. So most frameworks will tell you, you're out of date, and some of them will tell you, oh, there's this really obvious vulnerability that we know about. Software composition analysis tools, their only purpose is to tell you of either licensing violations or security concerns. And quite often, the companies that make those actually have a full team of security researchers. And so they're actually scanning like the new releases themselves and looking for vulnerabilities themselves before they recommend that you use the stuff. So it's usually like it'll find like 10 times as much stuff as say like the thing that comes with your framework. So for instance, like GitHub has Dependabot and it's cool and it will tell you a bunch of things that are missing. And I tell everyone to turn it on. However, it won't find as much as some of the ones that are direct from a security team. So it depends on how much money you have to work with, what level of security you need. So like my company, we make training. So none of the information that we have is super sensitive except for like my employees' personal information, and my client personal information. But like if someone leaks our course, that's intellectual property, that would be awful, but like it's not, no one's gonna die. Right? Like we're not going to go out of business the next day. It's not really, really important. But for other people, it could be huge. Like, if Madonna, the musician, had her album leaked a few weeks before it went live, like that could completely ruin her sales and like result in a loss. And that would be huge. Right? And so it depends on what risk you have, how much money you want to spend to protect something.
You were talking about pipelines, and that sort of brings up the topic of DevSecOps. What is that, and would you like to sort of explain how that fits in with AppSec?
Yeah, so application security is all the stuff we do to make sure our apps are secure. And then DevSecOps is basically what us AppSec folks do when everyone else is doing DevOps. So if I work at a company and they're doing DevOps, then I need to get my butt in order and do things like within their processes. So if they're releasing code every week, then I need to figure out a way to get my processes to be able to look at that or find a way to do things so I feel safe with them doing that. It is not my job to stop them from getting their work done. I know it feels like it, because when I was a dev, I was like, is it literally your job to make it that I can't do my job because you kick ass at your job? But it's not. So the idea is, so for instance, like let's say ops is using infrastructure as code, then I would love to be able to scan like their infrastructure as code for vulnerabilities. Like, oh, I'm seeing like you missed this configuration. Like I would really love it if you did have this configuration. Also, are you backing up that infrastructure as code into your code repository? And if you're not, you're gonna make me cry. And just kind of
that on Bill's computer. So
yeah, we have it on Bill's computer. Don't worry, I have a copy saved to a floppy disk. I put it in my drawer full of magnets. Yeah.
Sorry for derailing you.
No, it's okay. But yeah, that's the idea, is that it's what security people need to do to make sure that the DevOps teams are doing all their awesome DevOps, but what they're releasing is as secure as we can get it reasonably. And it's really important that if you are a security person, you're going to go work in a place where it's waterfowl, agile, or DevOps, you get yourself on board with their processes, because developers are like water. They can just go around anything they want. And I remember, like, so I do consulting on the side because I am workaholic, but well, and I want to keep knowing AppSec, right? So if I'm going to teach it, and I keep writing articles and whatever. Anyway, so I went into this place and they're like, well, we're scanning everything with this expensive SaaS tool in every single pipeline. We run it every time and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, cool. Did the devs turn it off yet? And they're like, no. Yes, they did.
Yep.
So it was turned off in like 2/3 of the pipeline, and then the other thirds it was turned on, but it was muted. So it didn't matter if it was like 100 criticals, it would never break the build. And it all went into a folder that no one had ever logged into one single time.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like you $2,000 for this tool per year. I am costing you like $30K as like a part-time consultant. You're getting a steal. I just saved you $200,000. And then I'm like, let's find a better way, because the tool's a good tool, but the way we're using it isn't working. So let's do a way where it works for the devs, because they're telling you this shit doesn't work for me. Sorry, I swore. That's what they're telling you when they do that. They're not like, security's not important to me. They're not like, I hate those people on the security team. What they're doing is saying, I have a deadline. This is the deadline. I have to get there. I would love my app to be secure, but you providing gobbledygook in some other folder that's way away from my bug tracker that I don't even remember how to get to. I don't know what any of the results mean, and most of it's false positives. No, I have work to do, Tanya. Stop wasting my time. And so it's like about working with the devs and working with ops and understanding how we can help them do their jobs securely, like enable them. And sometimes that means buying a different tool or doing things a different way. And sometimes it means not putting stuff in the pipeline, because no one appreciates you adding an hour unless you're adding an hour's worth of value. Like if the pipeline's 9 minutes and you're adding an hour, wow, you better be gold plating that app. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What's the answer there? Because like you said, if we're doing DevOps and the ultimate goal there is to quicken that feedback loop, get it into an environment, make sure that it works, and get people testing it and putting their eyes on it and putting their mouse clicks through the application and verifying the features that we're delivering work as expected. We also want to ensure security, but like you said, we don't want to add an hour to our pipeline just to get that turnaround. Is the solution an additional pipeline? Is it doing more collaborative work with the security professionals and getting them involved from that early conversation before you even start thinking about pipelines and deployments?
So I have so many answers for you. So first of all, I believe in adding security requirements to every project. Like if there's a web app, there's certain things I know that I want you to do. If you're doing a file upload, I know that there's extra things I want you to do, etc. So if you start with some requirements and you're like, listen, if you want to go play on the internet, you need to be this tall to ride this ride. And that requires, like, let's say HTTPS, and it requires, all of these things. So then you're already setting some standards. I also believe in giving them secure code guidelines or requirements or training so that I know that they have like a certain level of knowledge. So I'm not walking around whacking people on hands for making the exact same mistake over and over because I never taught them what I wanted. So like give them all the expectations of what you need from them. And then I'm also a big fan of secure design, applying those concepts when you design, and that usually means spending time with a security person. I'm also a fan of threat modeling, but let's put those aside. So those are extra things. In a pipeline, there are a lot of things you can do to make things faster. And sometimes it means taking things out. Sometimes it means having two. So one thing you could do is if devs have lots of awesome unit tests, if you could work with them and create negative unit tests or abuse unit tests. So you can add in things that are dangerous that you're concerned about. And then every time they run their unit tests, it will also test to make sure that they fail gracefully with bad input. So that's one thing you can do. So if someone changes something and then all of a sudden, the attack gets through, it's like, oh. So that's before you get to the pipeline. When you go to check in your code, you can do something called sorry. You can do a pre-commit hook. So you can say, like, as you're checking in the code, you can scan it for secrets. And it's like, oh gosh darn, that looks like a hash. That looks bad. I don't think you should check that in. Or, oh, a connection string, including the password. No. No, thank you. And it can stop you there. And that's before you even get to the pipeline. Then in the pipeline, you can do faster checks in the release one. So the one that actually goes out and releases it to different environments. So a fast check would be something like secret scanning, something like SCA, something like you could do a dynamic application security testing scan, except for if you work with your QA team, if they're doing something like Selenium automated tests where it like tests the GUI every time. When they do that, they create something called a HAR file, an HAR file. So you can take that, plug that into your DAS tool. Not all of them do it, but lots of them do. And then it will follow that exact thing, like punching everything in the face as it goes, but it'll run like 10 times quicker than if you didn't give it that HAR file. And so you can say like, this is the functionality we're the most concerned about, or this is the way we want you to test. So you can do a subsection of testing with that. And then you can run the whole gamut in another pipeline that does not block release, that runs asynchronously. And then you can have a security person check, once a week or once a day, depending upon how many security people you have. And they can go through and then fish out the false positives and look through it and say, okay, so there's actually, 10 things here, but only 3 of them really worry me. Can we talk about these 3? I want to put them in your backlog. And so you could automate these tests running because, let's say every minor release that you change, it kicks off this parallel pipeline that has a ton of security checks that takes like 13 hours to run. You never want to wait for that. But I come in Monday morning and I'm like, woohoo! I'm going to go dig through these results and then like give everyone prezzies. There's a bug for you and a bug for you, but like, it's good because we're catching these things, right? So there's lots of like strategies for how to do things faster. But what I see a lot of in industry is people plugging in really old AppSec tools that are high quality, amazing tools that are not supposed to be used that way. And then they're really frustrated with the results. And it's like, well, yes, I could take a mug and probably hammer in a nail, but it's not going to go well because that's not what it's built for.
Yeah. Also, what you're describing also sounds a lot like a lot of human working with humans. There's not just. I feel like most of the security that I've encountered is, well, we just want an app that makes it secure, an application, right? So we're going to pay as much money as it takes in order to give us the thing that makes it secure, and then it's going to spit out all the work for you, dev, to do. And right, you're going, well, wait a second, like that's not how security works. You can't make something secure. There's levels of security. Like we could make it more secure or less secure, but we can't make it secure. And your whole business approach. So how do you work with the business to sort of even understand, like what how application security even is feasible and work? Because I feel like that's where one of the big disconnects, especially in really large companies.
So in my course, I basically just teach what I do. And so there's a bunch of different ways that you can get buy-in. So you need, in order to legitimize your AppSec program, so there's tons of people that do AppSec and it's like an extra part of their job they don't get paid for. And then no one buys them the tool they need. No one gives them like an intern that they really need to help them just go through like, piles of results. And then they often, because they don't have buy-in and legitimacy, they don't have the ability to get the changes needed that they want. And so there's a bunch of different ways that you can get buy-in and a bunch of different groups you need buy-in from. So there's management, and then there's the devs. And so for management, you can get buy-in in a bunch of ways. So like I was actually speaking to a client this week that had a huge hack in 2018. He's like, yeah, whatever you say, we're going to do it. I'm like, awesome. And he's like, it's all I have to do is say, remember 2018. And then they just do. But most organizations don't have that. So instead, with managers, what I've done in the past is explain very clearly the risk in ways they understand. So as a super smart person, but who doesn't do AppSec. So I can't say the sky is falling, blah, 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 CVE, blah. I have to speak their language. So I explain, no, what could happen is that our customers could have this, and then this law is enacted. What could happen is this, and here's the likelihood I see of this happening. Here's other examples in industry of this happening. But if they don't want, if the business still isn't in, what I've often done is created something called a risk sign-off sheet. And it's me placing blame in writing. So I'm like, I have alerted you to these things that are like making me pull my hair out and cry. I'm so worried about them. I want to make it clear in writing that you are not allowing me to action these things. And no one signs it. They're always like, go to hell. The point is that I put it in writing, and I'm like, your inaction is acceptance of this risk. I'd like you to sign this sheet. They never sign. And they're just like, well, what do you want from me? I'm like, I want the authority, not just the responsibility. And so things usually go better then, but that's like a last ditch resort. I also often will just make cool proof of concepts. Like I worked somewhere once and I wanted them to use security headers, and I sent all the security team, because there's the security team and the devs that were against the security headers. The security team were like, we're risk analysts and we don't dictate code, and you don't get to dictate code. And I was like, okay. So then I was just like, hey, everybody, click this link. You won an iPod. And they're like, Tanya, we know this is from you, and we know we didn't win an iPod. I'm like, well, you know, we have 20,000 employees, and you know they love clicking on things. So how about you click? And so they clicked, and they're like, wow, this website looks just like prod that you're framing and stealing the credentials. I'm like, it is prod. It's that easy. And then they're like, well, it's bright yellow. It's really obvious. I'm like, dude, half the time of me making this proof of concept was figuring out how to make it visible so you could see what I was doing. It's invisible by default. And they're like, so what are these lines of code we need to add? But with devs, I feel like it's easier to get their buy-in through just sharing information with them and making it interesting. So my very first AppSec program, like I was a dev, I was in charge of the dev team, and then I was in charge of hiring the pen tester, I was in charge of hiring the secure code review people, and I was in charge of mitigating all the things. And then I ended up moving to the security team and then being the CISO very quickly. And the devs, I wanted them to start scanning their apps, because we're doing no security whatsoever, basically, except for that one app. And so I sent an email out to all of them, and they knew me, and I was like, I'm going to break into a bank at lunch. Who wants to see? There'll be donuts. Because that works.
Count me in. Yeah.
Pizza's even better. But anyway, so then I just showed them, like, here's this intentionally vulnerable app, and like, this is the way I could get in. And I made them help me. I'm like, oh, like what, maybe it could be this. And I kept like guessing wrong on purpose. And then we got it. And then we spilled out the session ID. We spilled out the passwords. And I was like, this happened to one of our apps this year. And they're just like, oh. And I was like, please let me help you make this not happen. Like, here's how we could have stopped this. Here's another way we could have stopped this. Here's this. And I'm like, I need your help. And then they're like, what do we do? I'm like, I'm going to show you. And then I just started like having lunch and learns, basically. Like, I learned a new thing. Who wants to come? There is pizza. And then like bribery works really well. You are all software developers, so you probably know. But like in Canada, if you have a pizza and there's like all of us software developers come out of nowhere and we're like, hello, I heard you called me. In Canada, we eat a lot of pizza. Like immigrants often comment, they're like, damn, Canadians like pizza. Like, we really do. But anyway, yeah. So I guess I try to attract people to security to get their buy-in whenever possible. I don't like going around with a stick. I'm much more likely to try to get as many people to come to me and then always help them. So like if a dev says to you, so we're going to do this, like, do you know how to do it? I don't always know how to do it, but I say, I don't know how, but I'm going to find out. Can we have a meeting? Can we brainstorm? Can we write this out on a whiteboard? Can I have some time to research this? Like when you leave a dev hanging, they still have a deadline. They're still going to code it. they're just not going to code it with your security advice. They have stuff to do. Yeah.
Well, in my experience, that's the biggest, I get the rejection of security additions is just the business has a deadline for me. I don't know anything about security. I'm doing what the framework that I'm working in suggests. Get off my back. I don't have time for this. It's an internal app, and nobody's even going to ever see it. Just leave me alone. And like you mentioned putting together those really awesome demos, and if I could do that, I would love to do that. But I did not get a chance to go to like an ethical hacker course I'm interested in so many things, and learning about security is on the list, but it's not the highest thing on the list because it's one of those topics. It's like you open up the book and it's just all Greek, so you put it down. Is there how can an individual like myself who's interested? Oh, there's a book.
Sorry.
Yeah, how can someone like me get the information without it being completely foreign and then maybe be able to help their coworkers also get that information?
So I wrote a book because this book didn't exist, and because I kept teaching it to people, and people said, "Why can't I just buy this in a book? Like, why isn't there a book on this?" And I was like, "I don't know." And then publishers started writing me, and they're like, "Your blog's really great. What if it was a book?" And I was like, "I don't have time for this." And I didn't, but then I did. So Alice and Bob Learn Application Security is a book that I wrote so that devs can know security. It's also for security people, but it starts at the very beginning with like the first chapter is basically like, why is the security team bothering me? And what is confidentiality, integrity, and availability? How does it affect a character named Alice or a character named Bob? So Alice and Bob are super famous in the security field. When encryption was invented, and they're trying to explain it to the normals who weren't mathematicians, they're like, Alice wants to tell Bob a secret. How does she do that securely? How does Bob know the secrets from Alice? How does he know it wasn't changed? And they used those two characters as a story to explain. And so since then, we all use Alice and Bob for basically everything. But I've given Alice and Bob families, careers, health conditions, and it's not a storybook, but there are stories all throughout it to explain. And the idea is then I go through the system development lifecycle. So, no matter what you're doing, you have to have requirements of what you're writing, whether it's iterative or if it's very, very, very long at the beginning, and then, you do a huge waterfall. But what are security requirements? Like, what do they mean? How would I apply one? And so there's some code in the book, but a lot of the book is like the idea of like how to create an application security program, how to, as a dev, just understand why the security team needs this from you, or what they would want from you, or, oh, I'm designing an app. So how could I design security into that app? I also like to think that it's funny because I think I'm funny. And so there's lots of kind of like cute little jokes and cute stories. There's also a lot of like happy ending stories where it's a thing that happened to me and that's what I dream or wish had happened. But really management was like, we can't afford that, Tanya. But yeah, I wanted a book to exist. Sorry, Ash?
Yeah, no. So what other resources might you direct people to? I obviously you guys have courses at We Hack Purple, and but what about some of the apps you mentioned? Are there anything that's free or like any other good resources that you can point people to?
Well, thank you for the setup. We're releasing some free mini courses through our newsletter at newsletter.wehackpurple.com. And they actually the first round started today, but we're just going to continue to release them. And so one is about incident response. So if your app is being attacked, like what do you do? And how do you prepare for that to make sure that you're ready? And so that's more of a security team type of thing, but having devs understand what's needed from them can be really helpful. And then the other one is about how to scale your security program and scale your security team when you don't have more security dollars. And like all, because I have worked at places where I'm not officially AppSec, but I still have to run an AppSec program, and my budget is this. So I have lots of tricks and trades, but there's so many places. So I'm a huge fan of the Open Web Application Security Project, also known as OWASP. And if you want to go to their website, it's owasp.org. So they have chapters all over the world. They have all sorts of projects. So I was part of a project until literally last month for several years called OWASP DevSlop, like sloppy DevOps. And basically me and a friend, she created an awful app like with microservices. And then I was like, let's smash that. And then we just started making videos of us smashing things and like giving workshops on how to hack JWT tokens and stuff like that. And then I was like, what if we just like streamed ourselves like doing security testing and building stuff and then breaking stuff and cloud stuff. And then before we knew it, we had like a collective of all these different techie women where like we would just smash things together and have guests on. So they still do something at least twice a month, every month. So if you want to learn from a whole bunch of very intelligent, fun ladies, OWASP DevSlop has its own YouTube channel and it's totally awesome. OWASP, though, itself has tons of vulnerable apps. So they have a project where they track the tons of vulnerable apps so that you can go and play with lots of them. They also have another page where it shows you all the different like online war games. So a war game is like an intentionally vulnerable system where you're trying to find vulnerabilities and then exploit them and then get points and you're cool. And then they have meetups, which right now are on the internet. And so that's awesome because you can literally attend from anywhere. And so I live on Vancouver Island, but the Vancouver chapter is much more active than my chapter. And so sometimes we just go to theirs because we can, and they're our neighbors. And so OWASP is an amazing community for this. And most of the things OWASP does are free, except for when they have conferences or paid training. But yeah, there's just thousands and thousands and thousands of volunteers like me who run all of these things because we care a lot. And so if you want to get into stuff, definitely OWASP and We Hack Purple is the way to do it for sure. I've met so many amazing human beings through the OWASP community. And
Awesome.
and like they love devs. That's who they're doing it for. But mostly to attract security nerds because, well, we wish that devs would show up all the time, but you know, it's a mix. I would say chapters are usually like half security people, half devs. But we all know there's a lot more devs than there are security people. So we need to, I don't know, get more pizza or something.
I think it's just the circles in which people run, you know, like
Yeah.
it's like I would totally go to a security meetup, but I've never looked for one.
Yeah.
So I think I'll start. Maybe I'll attend the Vancouver one or something.
Yeah. That's why actually I would do my talks. So I like speak at conferences and stuff a lot. And I do lots of talks for developer meetups, specifically to reach developers because they're the ones that we need to make secure apps, right? So I'm like, oh, let's push left. Like, let's go earlier in the system development lifecycle. I don't want to come in at the end. I want the dev to know me from the beginning.
Yeah.
All right. What has been helpful in your career that you might share with those just getting started or maybe those looking to level up their own careers?
I feel that having a professional mentor is the thing that has made, well, and like lots and lots and lots and lots of hard work, but is one of the things that has made me so successful. So when I joined security, I had a professional mentor at first, and that person ended up being, of all the professional mentors I had, being the absolute worst one. He taught me lots of things that I'm like, oh, now that I know more, that was illegal. Like, it's like not good messages. I was like, really? Because I feel like, he's like, oh no, it's not a big deal. I'm like, Then I got better, law-abiding one, and another one. And having someone that you know that you can trust who has your best interests at heart as opposed to their own, and having like their years and years and years of experience. So like now I'm running a startup And then I have a bunch of professional mentors that founded their own startups, like way bigger than mine, helping me make really big decisions. So I only call on them when I really need them. And so this has helped me so much that a few years ago, I started an initiative on Twitter called Cyber Mentoring Monday. So it's a hashtag Cyber Mentoring Monday. And every single Monday for years now, I've paired people with professional mentors every Monday. And so if you want to learn stuff about security and you're a dev or you're ops or anything remotely to do with security, even if you're just like, I want to learn JavaScript, I'll retweet you. So I'm She Hacks Purple on Twitter. And yes, I have some purple in my hair. And purple is a security term. And basically, like, I'll retweet you to all my followers. And there are actually several of us now all across the information security industry that will retweet, and people that call out, like, I'm ready to mentor someone, like, this is the stuff I know, who needs help. And we have paired hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And it has resulted in people finding jobs, people switching like from one job to another, or switching groups where they work, people getting promoted, just like, and also like just a ton of friendships. And so it's been really beautiful to watch the information security community just come to life. And so someone will tweet like and use the hashtag Cyber Mentoring Monday, and they'll say, you know, like, I don't even know where to start. Like, if someone could just have a virtual coffee with me, or like, you know, I don't even, and so then everyone will come and say like, oh, here's an article that can help you choose, and like, here's a podcast that might help you. And then someone will say like, hey, do you want to like meet on Friday, and we'll both like meet on Zoom or something and have coffee. And yeah, it's been really beautiful. And I have to say, like, I don't know where I would be without my professional mentors, and how much time and heartache they have saved me in many situations, like whether to do something or not to do something. So for instance, when I was gonna start my startup, I'm risk adverse. I'm afraid of not having enough money to pay for my bills. Do you know what I mean? And starting a startup's really scary. And my professional mentor, Kim, sat with me and she said, do you have tons of outstanding debts and you're drowning in debt? I'm like, no. She's like, do you have like little babies that like need your attention all day? I'm like, no. And she's like, if you didn't make money for 6 months, like, can you be fine? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like consulting on the side. She's like, okay, so what are you afraid of? Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I was like, well, what if my startup doesn't go well? She's like, then you'll just get a really kick-ass high-paying job anywhere the F you want because you're Tanya Janca. And I was like, oh, she's like, yeah, worst case scenario, you quit and then walk into like a 6-figure job because you're like qualified out the wazoo. And I was like, oh. And she's like, so are you still scared? And I'm like, no. And she's like, great, mimosas. And I had a champagne for us because we were at a restaurant. And I was just like, oh my God, Kim's so amazing. Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah,
awesome,
I'm probably
awesome.
blushing.
So you mentioned your Twitter. Is that the best place for our listeners to go to follow you and sort of keep up with what you're working on, or is there someplace better?
So I have a newsletter for me. So every time I'm on a podcast or I write blog posts and share content, and it's free. It's newsletter.shehackspurple.ca. And then, because I'm Canadian, you can hear my accent when I talk about stuff. And I send that out approximately once a month / when I feel like it. I also, like, there's the We Hack Purple community, which is $100 a year to join. And I share 100% of content there. And then you kind of get to meet other people and hang out. For my company, so basically, like, I'm on Twitter all the time because I'm a nerd and I want to see what the other nerds are doing. And then I'm in my community all the time, talking to everyone and sharing stuff. But I also, my marketing team has made a Facebook page. The security people do not like Facebook. And Instagram, I'm like, I'm too old for Instagram. They won't let me on there. They're like, that's not true. There's not actually an age maximum. But my marketing team's like, you look great there. I'm like, oh no. But basically, like, if you go to wehackpurple.com, you'll see all the company stuff. And if you just look up She Hacks Purple, like, I have the YouTube, I have I have all the stuff. But I mostly hang out on Twitter.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
I know my marketing team's going to string me up. They're like, that's not what you were supposed to say at all. I'll be like, I know, I'm the worst.
Well, all right, chat, hang out just a few minutes. We'll wrap up the podcast here, and then we'll re-enable the drop game and continue the conversation and answer any questions over there. So just hang out, and we'll meet you over there in just a second. So thanks, Tanya. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Johns and Clayton, singular. No, this was great. Thank you. Devs are my people. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Great. That was Tanya Janca. Tanya is founder and CEO at We Hack Purple Academy, community and podcast. She's a best-selling author of Alice and Bob Learn Application Security.
If you like this episode, please like, rate, and review on iTunes.
Find show notes, blog posts, and more at sixfiguredev.com.
Catch us live each week on Twitch, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at sixfiguredev.
This has been another episode of the Six Figure Developer Podcast, helping others reach their potential. I'm John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I'm John Ash.
And I'm Tanya Janca. Sorry.
That's fine. It's in the
see,
recording.
Clayton,
Maybe John will leave it in for the podcast. Who knows?
Yeah. And Clayton, I heard your kids right there at the end. He said I couldn't always hear him.
Couldn't have possibly been mine. It was probably Ash
Was
screaming.
Ash is in? I don't know.
No, I have no idea. I heard something too.
Yeah, so Ryan was chatting up while we were recording. Sorry, wasn't able to address them. But when Tanya, when you said that you like to think that you're funny, he replied and said that you were, and also commented that you're a great guest. So thanks, Ryan. Appreciate that.
Oh, I can see all the comments now. So I went to the page, but then I guess it had like a little pop-up that was like click to see, but I was like, I'm busy chatting.
Oh,
Over that.
Yeah, and also the things I learned is that Loka Semasta Sukinu Bavantu. Sorry if I butchered that. Purple teams are, as their name would suggest, a single group of people who do both red and blue testing and securing of a company.
Yeah, so red teamers attack things. So when I was a pen tester, I was red team. It's like offensive security, while blue is defensive security. But because I just kept doing both, people are like, oh, you're a purple teamer. Those are so rare. People usually only like one side or the other. Like, I can't make up my mind. And so then people started calling me purple. And then I dyed some purple into the hair as like a surprise, like a joke. And I went to speak at a meetup and they're just like over the moon about it. So I was like, I'll just keep it. I like purple. It's pretty.
Yeah, we didn't spend much time talking about pen testing. Do you have thoughts, opinions, suggestions?
I think that pen testing, I think it's sad that pen testing is the most famous thing that our industry does because it's valuable, but people think it is the only thing you're supposed to do. And when I was a pen tester, I would come in like a few days before they're supposed to go live with their app, and no one had looked at security. The devs have had no support whatsoever. And then I would just like shoot fish in a barrel and look like super smart, even though like, honestly, I was not a great pen tester. I was okay. But I would look amazing because no one had looked at security before, right? Like I would look really cool, but I'm like, oh, I'm actually like average. But so then I just started showing up earlier and earlier on engagements and was like, can we just whiteboard this during the meeting? Oh, here's some suggestions I have for you for your architecture to make it more secure. And people are just like, oh. And my boss was like, stop doing that. I'm like, the clients love it. They keep asking for me. And he's just like, why can't you do your effing job? And I was like, I'm going to work somewhere else.
Nice.
Because I'm used to being a dev where you own the app and it's your baby.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a pen tester, you come in and you just like shoot stuff up and then leave. And I had a lot of trouble leaving. I'm like, oh, let me help you fix it. He's like, that's not your job. I'm like, it's billable hours. Do you know what I mean? Like if I'm helping, I'm helping. And if the client's super happy and then their app's more secure, if I just send them a report, they're probably not going to do anything because they don't know what it means.
Yeah.
But that boss sucked. And then my next job was way better. But you have to get your foot in the door somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I was going to say the thing about the pen testing, coming in at the end of the project and just being like, that's a problem, that's a problem, and that's a problem, is a bug report gets created. And then The business
one
goes,
has
okay,
time.
we've got these new features we want to develop, so we're going to work on those. We'll come
Yeah,
back to the bug later.
We're out of time. We're out of budget. Ship it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. But if I could be there during a design meeting, I could say, like, oh, whoa, this is scariness here. Like, can we talk about this? And then before you've built it, it's like, oh, well, what if we use this instead? Like JWT tokens, the payload is not encrypted. It's
Right.
Yeah, just base
it's
64.
encoded. Yeah, exactly. And so,
A64 encoded, right?
but yeah, exactly. It's like, so what if I gave you like another option so that you could send that securely and safely instead before you build it?
Talk to me. What do we got?
Oh yeah, okay. So you can pass stuff in a session cookie, and then so like in the book I have like a whole section on how to secure your cookies, and then you can just pass everything in a cookie, and it's like bulletproof, super secure. You can have it automatically expire and disappear or reset, and like have all of your session managed in there. I have like a few pages on session management and like how you can do it really safely. And like a JWT is fine if all you're passing is the session token to see like same session, same person, I'm still me. But if you want to put information in there about the client, that needs to go in a secure cookie. Or it needs to be stuff that is absolutely completely not sensitive. Like Tanya prefers to view this website in English. Well, Francois prefers to view it in French. It's like, okay, that's not sensitive information, but Francois gets paid this much, Tanya gets paid that much. You don't want to have that in there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, okay. So I get that. Like, if you're passing preferences or something, then that is fine. Although that is normally what I see stuck in cookies, right? And
Yeah, I
then
would
the
still put in-
JWT is used to talk to some API that you've built on the back end that may or may not be on the server that the web server is. And so what normally gets stuck in there is like the roles of the user, what their capabilities are.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you
Yeah,
would rather not have that
that's
in
sensitive. Yeah, no. I mean, like as a pen tester, I would love it in there because I'm gonna look really smart when I change them. But yeah, definitely. Instead, you could put that in a cookie and turn on like the HTTP only flag, the secure flag, and there's like a bunch of other settings, and pass it that way, and then no one can get at it. You can store it then encrypted in local storage. And if someone changes it, it'll just be goggly goop, right? And the server will receive it and be like, what's this? This is garbage. So there's, yeah, like, and I have had people say, well, with a JWT token, it's base 64 encoded and it's signed. And so therefore, if you don't have the private key, you wouldn't be able to sign it. So then it would look, so the integrity.
Yeah. You should be able to. Yeah, you should be able to tell that it's been modified.
Yeah, I've managed to get around that once because they just didn't protect their key very well. I was like, oh, there's the key. Thanks, dudes. That was bad.
So it's not
Like
bulletproof.
Yeah, so that's the sort of thing that you hire a pen tester to verify. But if you first can have a discussion when you're designing things with a human like me, I'll do threat modeling. So I'll say like, so what are you worried about? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? And like, if you were going to hack your app, how would you do it? And devs are brilliant, right? Like what they call a workaround, I call a security incident.
Yeah.
And so like, oh, if you're going to work around that, how would you? And if you have like a casual, comfortable conversation and it's like, I'm not going to punish you if you're doing a thing that is insecure. I'm going to talk about like, how could we improve this? Or like, is this a risk our org is willing to accept? And sometimes it is, but most of the time it's like, let's find a better way together. But I am the new guard of security person who was a dev forever. So I empathize with devs because I was a dev for like 17 years before I switched to security. And because I started developing at like 16 and then had like my first job the moment I turned 18. I was like, let me in there. And so I identify with the devs more than the security team. Like sometimes I'll be in meetings and I'll tell the security team to back off and that they're overreacting. And like a lot of people are like, whoa. I'm like, no, but we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. We have to get code out there before our competitors or whatever. And like, so what can we do so we're comfortable with the risk we're taking?
Yeah, and Ash pointing out that humans having conversations along the way is that's just blasphemy. If there's a tool out there, we need to use a tool, right? But you also mentioned that like the GitHub Dependabot. I love that thing, especially when it does the change for me and submits a PR, and all I have to do is approve. Like, yes, let's do that.
There's a bunch of security tools that you can arrange that with now that there's GitHub Actions.
Yeah,
I'm making a course on it this year.
Yeah, I worked with a financial institution for a little while. That part of my role was to evaluate some of the security scanning tools out there, like Sneak and some of the others that I've forgotten. Do you have a favorite or at least a set of tools or functionality that you would look for in a security scanning suite that you would roll into a pipeline?
So I really like Sneak, Sonatype, White Source. I really like, so I personally know a lot of the teams that make these things. So like I'm on the board at Neurolegion. They're a really new dynamic application security testing tool, and they can take a HAR file and then just like wreak havoc, and it's very dev friendly. So I really like that. They also made an intentionally vulnerable app that they're showing, like that they're sharing publicly with everyone, because they're like that. They're like the tree hugging dev, like they're those people. I really like Burp Suite. Like if you're a pen tester, it's like driving the nicest race car ever. But for the average dev, it's like, what the fuck are all these things? Like it took me an hour to figure out how to turn it on when I first got it, and that's not unusual. Just like how to turn it on. I'm like, I'm pressing the button. Why isn't it working? I don't suggest doing SAST, like static application security testing in a pipeline, unless you like hate yourself or you want to just automate it to run and it's not like in a release pipeline. I have not had a chance to use IAST yet, but every single client I know that they're just like, if you can afford it, you should get it. And it's like, it plugs into your app and it runs as you use your app. So you can like run your automated QA testing stuff and it will automatically find vulnerabilities from the inside out. And it's like really high quality results. So there's kind of, I don't know how to explain, like there's just so many things for scanning for secrets. If you're the Microsoft stack, Microsoft released a suite of hacker tools when I worked for them in 2019. And it's like $5,000, I think, for a year. And it'll scan for credentials, passwords, code quality, all sorts of stuff like that. And it's called Microsoft Risk Detection. So if you're a Microsoft shop and you're using like Azure DevOps, it's like a really good tool. But if you're not doing that, you can use like a free open source one called Truffle Hog, like hog like a pig, truffle like a chocolate or a mushroom. And it's free and it can find a lot of secrets. Like if you want to show off your security prowess, just be like, oh yeah, where's your code repository? And just point it at it. It's like, yeah, I found like 72 security incidents. Because there's secrets, license keys, passwords, hashes, all sorts of stuff that should not be there. And so, yeah, I could go on and on.
Yeah, I pulled down a repository for a client last year sometime and went, oh, I now have database passwords for all of your databases in every single environment. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's not good.
So all
What's that?
No,
and it's not hard. And if I found it in 10 minutes, a malicious actor can, and it's like super satisfying. Right? To be like, I found stuff, but it's also like, oh, I feel that's so sad. I just keep finding stuff.
Yeah, but like as a dev consultant coming in, I was just like, I don't want all this connection string information to your production database. I don't want access to your prod environment. Probably nobody else should have that either.
Right? Like not even your own devs.
Yeah, and that's what earlier I was going to say. All of the new apps that I've been working on, I have been doing them in Docker, and I've been replicating the bits of the production environment or test environment that I need to connect to in Docker. So, yeah, there's passwords and stuff in my code, but they're passwords to the fake Docker database that I'm spinning up, not to any real database.
Yeah.
And then I don't care who gets them. I had my DevOps actually. I was walking my DevOps through some of my new code, and they're like, "You've got a password over there." I'm like, "Yeah, it's password." It goes to the fake database that I created for this, and they were like, "Oh, okay."
There are tools to manage your secrets. And like the dev puts it in there, and then you can never get the secret back. You have to rotate the secret. And it will programmatically swap them out for you as you release your stuff in the pipeline.
Nice.
And just like manage all the secrets for you. And Microsoft did a demo when I worked for them at Microsoft Build in 2019. And they coded it so that if there was a breach of one of their secrets, that it would automatically rotate the keys for them. And I was like, oh, that's beautiful. Because when you put a password into the code, it's a security. It's a security incident and it's bad. And then I have a bad day and I have to cancel dinner. And so Microsoft was my first job where I didn't have to manage security incidents. So they'd always hire me and be like, hey, it's not part of your job. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, I don't want to do it. And then something would happen. Someone would attack one of our apps. They'd be like, only Tanya knows what to do. And I'm like, I didn't want to manage instance. They're like, oh, I guess you're just going to like leave and we're just going to like bleed our data all over the internet all night because Tanya has plans. Of course I can't leave.
Oh, this one's new. I've never seen this one before. You'll have to get somebody else.
Yeah, never admit to knowledge that you don't want to use.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I took COBOL off my resume as soon as I graduated. It's like, yeah, I don't know that. Definitely didn't take 2 courses in it. No.
So we've got a question. Do you recommend getting into security after being a sysadmin or directly getting into cybersecurity?
I think I made a video about it. Oh, are we still streaming?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that because I'm like, it's like they can hear us.
Sorry. Yes, they can still hear you. And
Okay. Hi, everyone. So for the getting like directly into cybersecurity, like the way that most people do if they're doing like networky side of things is they go directly to being a SOC, so Security Operations Center analyst. They're constantly hiring for that. And basically like you look at anomalies of things happening to your network, and there's like this big system that you stare at called the SIM. And then you like chase down to see if it's like actually terrifying or if it's okay. And then you eventually start hunting for threats and finding anomalies yourself and chasing them down. And then you usually start managing incidents. And that's one way. The way I did was I was a dev, and then I learned about AppSec. And then I just volunteered for every security thing where I worked and just like took over, because I am like a runaway train when I want something. And so I'm just like, oh, I'm in charge of this pen test now. You can go. And it just start doing every single thing, reporting security incidents, et cetera, and just telling the security team, like, I want to try working on your team. A thing that we're doing in the We Hack Purple community is we have like a little group called Jobs. And one of my co-op students looks at the jobs board every week and then just puts truly entry-level jobs. So a problem in InfoSec is they'll say, junior InfoSec role must have 5 years experience and 23 different certifications. And I'm like, oh, that's stupid. So we post like really general entry-level jobs, like 0 to 1 year's experience, studied computers in school, or has 2 years experience doing something computery and has read this many books. And the idea is they want to know that you're worth training because you're going to work and you're dedicated to learning. We try to connect our grads with job opportunities because companies will say, we're hiring, can I meet your grads? Right? Because it's so hard to find someone that understands application security and like knows where to start. And so it's like, well, they did like the 4 projects that we make them do. And like, we did this and we did that with them, but then they need hands-on experience. So I hope that helps. So there's another question. If you can get directly to, oh, I wrote that. Wait, so as the tool has access to the systems using the secret. So Trufflehog can look and find secrets in your code. And then there's HashiCorp Vault, which is agnostic, and you can use like in the cloud, on-prem, whatever, to hold all your secrets. And then you can call out to it programmatically from your app or from the pipeline. So I'm ex-Microsoft, and so I use a lot of Microsoft tools. And so for Azure DevOps, they have Azure Key Vault, and like you just click a button and it's like perfectly integrated. It's very, very nice. With GitHub, if you're using GitHub Actions, there's GitHub Secret Manager, and you put the secrets in there, and again, you can never get them back, and it just programmatically handles it for you. So let's say I'm going to put Sneak into my pipeline, which I've done a bunch of times. Like there's an API secret. And so you log into your Sneak account, you get it, you go into GitHub, you save it as a secret, and then it just like connects and magically works. And I really like that about it. But you don't want to handle secrets as a dev if you don't have to, because then there's the possibility of screwing it up. And so if you can make a secret manager handle it for you, that's nice. I don't like doing extra work. I keep seeing ! Drop.
Yeah, we've got the drop game from our friend over at Clayton. You remember the name? I never
It's
remember.
Pixel Plush is the website, and so basically you type bang drop, and then a little tiny, it looks kind of like an inflatable pool shows up at the bottom of the screen, the stream, and then so now you're a snowman dropping down to the and then you'll either hit the pool or not.
Oh, I can't see what's happening. What happens if you hit the pool?
You get points.
You get points.
But they're not real points. They're just
they're made up. They don't mean anything. It's fine. Yeah, Frank
Cool.
says InstaFluff is the gentleman that created that. So thank you, Frank.
Yeah,
Bonjour.
that's
Welcome.
cool. I enjoy being a snowman.
Some of the clients that I've been at, they have run those tools against their production environments, their security tools. We do it against like a staging environment. Would you say, obviously there's some cons about running it against production. Would you say that was a bad practice? And then B, should that environment be like standalone, or can you like the QA environment or some other testing environment? What do you think?
It depends. So if you want to evaluate your real security of your organization, then you want to test production. However, if you're doing waterfall, sometimes I say waterfall. So
Yeah, exactly.
like halfway in between. But so if you're doing waterfall, probably your environments do not mirror themselves. But if you're doing infrastructure as code and like full DevOps and you're replicating everything perfectly, then you should theoretically be able to test any environment. And then why would you test prod when you could test QA or some other area? But a lot of organizations that I've worked at, some of their apps are doing super nice, sleek DevOps. A whole bunch are kind of halfway in betweeny.
Yep.
And then a whole bunch of other apps, they're like, oh, we just don't talk about those. I'm like, I need to talk about those because
Especially
bad people look at the bad stuff first. Like when I was a pen tester, I'm like, what's the oldest crap here? Good, I'll start there. Right? Because because that's the best place to start. That's the best place to. Well, that's just because the framework is old. Is the like there's more time for malicious actors to find more things wrong with it, and so older apps also tend, because security is becoming more and more important and more at the forefront of things. If something's from 8 years ago, even though it was considered secure then, it's probably not secure now. So would I test that in prod? No. If it's 8 years old, probably not. I would probably test it in a safer environment first. I also, like, if you have like legacy old crap that's super on fire, a lot of security people say, just upgrade it. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not a button that you just click. It's not like devs are like, oh, I could press this button, but I'd rather go get coffee. It's like a crap ton of work. Like updating. So I worked somewhere and we had 2,000 apps using struts, Java struts.
Oh, yeah.
2,000.
Wow.
And then I was like, you know what would be awesome if every time we wrote a new app, it was in Spring Boot. And all the older apps that we like get some pretty sweet web app firewalls in front of them or some rasps. Maybe we could segment off part of the network. So if an evil person gets in, they can't go anywhere good. Like, can we do harm reduction? Because we're not going to rewrite 2,000 apps. We're just not. But we could compromise, and like every new app is Spring Boot, and you try not to be on version 1 of struts. Seriously, a whole bunch of them were on version 1. I'm like, why do you hate me? I joke that like I have all these gray hairs, and they're like Java struts version 1.1, Java struts 1.2. So, there's questions in the chat that aren't just eye drop.
Yeah, so as you might know, security is not a priority in third world countries. How hard is it for someone to go abroad and land a job at security? What advice do you have to do? What do you think about it?
So do they mean going from a less developed country to a more developed country? Because my advice would be that you should get a visa or follow that country's rules to be able to immigrate. And if possible, like get qualifications first and say, yeah, because I know for the United States, so I'm Canadian, but the United States, I wanted to get a work visa because I was going to give training there. Because I don't know if you know, there's a lot more money in your country than in my country. And I was like, oh, that would be cool to have some of it. And so I was like, I'm going to apply for a visa. And if you're a tech worker, you have a really good chance of getting a visa. But if you're like, oh, I'm a cybersecurity expert, they're like, oh, we need those. So you're more likely. However, with the election your country just had, like a few weeks before the election, many security professionals I know that were American were like, I need to come to your country and live there for around 4 years. Can I come to your country? And one of them told me she did the whole thing, and they said that her cybersecurity experience, because she didn't have a degree or a diploma in it, wasn't acceptable. And I was kind of surprised because I don't know if any of you know, but most InfoSec professionals don't have a computer science diploma. I'm like an anomaly.
I don't have one.
We don't have.
Yeah, so if you look in InfoSec, it's even lower than with programmers. A lot of them are political science, or they're like, oh, I took like this.
I was going to be a historian, but this is what I'm doing now.
It does tend to pay better, but
right. But so having like a computer science degree or diploma or whatever gives me a head start on a lot of things. Like, for instance, I had to write my own compiler. So then when I explain to people how SAST works, I'm like, oh, it kind of works like a compiler, and it parses and it does this and that, and it breaks down, but then it looks for this. And people are just like, where do you get this stuff?
So Ryan
but it helps to be able to explain or to understand, oh, that's shell code. Oh, I see. Sorry, John?
Yeah, Ryan had a question, I think, building upon your 2,000 apps, compartmentalizing the code with security. Is that kind of what you're describing, to protect the old stuff with newer security practices? Or
so for legacy apps, I would, first of all, try to assess how bad it is. because some of them are really terrifying and some of them are actually not that bad. So you could probably scan it like with a SAST or a DAST tool if you have one. If it's a Windows app, just do a SAST tool. I don't know. Anyway, so figure out like, did my scanner catch fire? Okay, so I need to do a lot of protection, or is it like, oh, there's a couple things, but it's old and we don't know. And so you can do something called network segmentation. So like make it its own island. So if something gets in, it can't get out. But another thing you can do, yeah. Oh, good. So you're explaining the difference between SAST and DAST. Good call. Maybe I should explain that verbally. But basically, you want to make sure nothing can get around it. Then you want to put a shield in front of it. So like a WAF, a web app firewall, or a RASP, a runtime application security protection tool. RASPs are more modern, sometimes called a reverse proxy, but basically like a shield so that really obvious attacks, no, you can't come here. And then another thing you can do, so like let's say you have this app and like the login is basically non-existent. There's no logging, there's no multi-factor authentication, etc. Like quite often, if you want to be PCI compliant or HIPAA compliant, you need to have those things. And so you can put something called a CASB, a Cloud Access Security Broker. So it's CAS, like CASB. And you can put them on-prem. It doesn't have to be in the cloud. And basically what it will do is it's a layer in front of your app. Nothing can go to your app unless it goes through the CASB. And the CASB is like, are you on my list of okay? These are what you're allowed to do. I'm going to log you in and out. I do multi-factor. You can't get there unless it's through me. And so then you have like multiple layers of protection. So look at the risk and see how many layers of protection you need, and then apply them, reduce your risk with the promise that like within 2 years it will be rewritten or whatever, or sometimes they don't need it anymore. And so it's a lot about like, can we reduce the harm in the scary places so there's no more scary dumpster fires? And then let's make a program overall that is good that we can use to improve our apps over time. So like if everyone's doing a pipeline, great. Can I scan for secrets? Awesome. So now we're not getting secrets. It's been a few months, no false positives. All the devs know what they're doing. Great. Now let's do some SCA. Let's do some DAST and SAST, etc., and kind of like slowly build up the team. And I also usually do lots of training too, because I am a trainer, but also because when I was a dev, I didn't have that. I didn't have any support. The first time a security person scanned one of my apps, they just forwarded the report from the automated tool and said, your app sucks, fix it. And I was like, what does this mean? They're like, you should know. If you were a good dev, you would know. And I was like, what? Why are you being mean to me? Thought we were friends, Tony. And then he just like kept scanning it and like sending me crap. And then finally I fixed it. And he was like, well, if you were a good dev, it would never have had those problems. And I was just like, I don't think we're friends anymore. That's not nice. Why are you being mean to me? My whole team's like, Tony was so mean. The point of the story is that like, I would rather take that as an opportunity to say like, hey, can we have a meeting and we could like chat about them? And like, I could help give you some ideas of how to fix them. And what I do with like some clients is I'll do like a secure coding training, and then devs will be like, well, what about this? I'm like, yes, this is a great excuse to have a meeting with them. I'm going to influence you and teach you security. And then before you know it, you're like having, different meetings with different teams. And they're like, oh, well, there's this design meeting and I'm sure it's really boring and you don't want to go. I'm like, yeah, I totally want to go. Can I go? And then slowly you kind of melt them. And they're like, oh, Tanya doesn't seem that bad. We can have her at the meeting. Like I feel like I can trust her and tell her a secret, and she's not going to yell at me and tell my boss I'm bad. She's going to help me fix it. And like that's important.
Yeah. So don't be mean to people and tell them that they're bad. Got it.
So I should not work in security.
So it says, what is your pizza consumption per week? So I'm gluten-free now.
Oh, no.
So yeah, like 12 years ago, I went on a trip and I caught a parasite, and then I can't digest gluten now.
So
totally sucks.
So just melted cheese and pepperoni then.
Yeah, no. So I have gluten-free pizzas. So it's like made with cauliflower, or it's made with like other things like cassava flour or whatever, like tapioca. Or
Yeah,
and Costco has this really delicious one, and so I probably eat one per week. But
I've made
compared
an
to
I've made an egg-based crust for pizza. It's
yeah, Parmesan cheese, egg, and cauliflower, so
Pretty
good.
fantastic, actually. Yeah, I agree.
When I look at the recycling bin, so I live in an apartment. There's 3 apartments in my building. They're like full of pizza boxes. Like we're Canadian, can't help it.
it's cheap,
If I
it's
have like
easy.
one pizza a week, they're like, "You're not holding up the rep, Tanya. I'm gonna kick you out."
Well, and in the 20s, I mean, since you got to order everything, and that means fast food, pizza, or Chinese. I mean,
Isn't that all
Yeah.
fast food though? I mean,
well, no, I mean like when I say fast food, I mean like
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 McDonald's and
Taco
Burger
Bell,
King.
McDonald's, and Burger King. You know, do you want a burger, a taco, a pizza, or
Do you
some?
want the food to make you sad?
Oh, he's saying, "Was your pizza concern regarding team meetings?" And I would say that like it depends on the place that I've worked, and therefore the level of like funding we have. And so I ran the OWASP chapter in Ottawa with friends, like other leaders, and we would spend $200 to $300 per meetup on pizza.
Wow.
And like our entire budget, like 98% of it was just for pizza. And it's basically people aren't going to travel from downtown to their home in suburbia, eat dinner, and come back for our meetup. So we made it right after work, and it's like, we'll feed you. Just come learn. And that worked really well. 6-figure dev equals 6-topping pizza. I'll take it.
Yeah, quattro formaggio, pepperoni, and I don't know. I'm a pepperoni pizza kind of person. I don't know about everybody else.
Oh, I want Hawaiian with mushrooms, and it has to be real bacon, not ham.
Oh, I don't.
Do you see
so
the
not-
disgust? Not ham.
not Canadian bacon.
Yeah, I was gonna say
That imposter bacon.
Yeah,
Yeah, we just call it bacon. I was telling someone that they should just sell whatever they're selling and call it Canadian. So like Canadian celery, it's Canadian potatoes, totally different. And it's like, but these just no, they're Canadian.
yeah.
It's like, just see if it sells. They're like, no, we should call them Norwegian potatoes. Be like super obscure. Yeah, they have the best potatoes. It's like, well, it was grown here. Yeah.
Canadian
My-
potatoes is just poutine, isn't it?
So true. Oh, one of my hobbies is farming. So yeah,
nice.
I grow a lot of food. Okay, I have to go to my next thing, or I'm
Yeah.
gonna be in trouble.
That's all right.
This has
Certainly
been really
appreciate
fun.
it. Yeah, we will be back. Chat, appreciate everybody hanging out. Tanya, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. The episode will be live in 2 weeks on, I think we said February 8th. So look for that in your podcast apps. We will be back live streaming, live streaming code, live coding Wednesday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern, and then following Monday for the podcast at 6 p.m. Eastern. So with that, we will raid our friend over at Mastermind and have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
All right.